Hello again, it's your friendly neighborhood host JT Wheatley back for another episode of the History of Comics podcast, this time with the life of Don Heck. Not every comic book artist is a trailblazer like Jack Kirby or Steve Ditko, creating exciting new characters or showing new artistic techniques that change the medium. Some are talented journeyman workers who get the job done and done well, and along the way manage to make their own contributions to the comic book medium. A prime example of this is Don Heck, a talented artist who was more suited for westerns and military comics, but due to circumstances of his time, found himself in the middle of the Marvel Silver Age, and as a result managed to help co-create some classic characters like Hawkeye and my personal favorite, Iron Man. Donald L. Heck was born on January 2nd, 1929 to John and Bertha Heck. He lived in the Jamaica area near Queens, New York, in a working-class neighborhood consisting of German and Italian immigrants that lies north of the JFK International Airport. Don's father, John, worked for the Neptune Water Company until his death in 1959. After his father's death, Don Heck's mother, Bertha, went to work for the A&S department store in Green Acres Mall in the Valley Stream, New York, where she would continue to work until her own death in 1965. Don Heck enjoyed growing up in his neighborhood and had multiple studios in his house for photography and painting, divided between the basement, the patio, and the back room. His first ever drawing was of Donald Duck. During the Korean War, Don Heck joined the National Guard and was sent to the Signal Corps, which allowed him to not be deployed to Korea. After his service, Don Heck went to New York State Tech for 2 years and greatly admired comic strip artists Milton Caniff, Hal Foster, and Alex Raymond, arguably the three greatest adventure artists of all time. Heck would originally work in advertising, design, and layouts, but hated it as he longed to be a comic strip artist. He later went to the Harvey Publications in December of 1949, where he stayed for 2.5 years before going freelance. There, he would finish off reprints and add paste up and so forth. Heck also repurposed newspaper comic strips photostats in the comic book form, which included work on one of his comic book idols, Milton Caniff. Alan Hardy, an employee at Harvey, would later start Comic Media Comics in 1952, where Heck would freelance for after Hardy asked him to join. He would later work on Harrigan's Hat and War Fury #1 in November of 1952, with his first feature being Johnny Danger, along with providing work for publishers like Quality, Toby Press, and Hillman. War Fury #1 would be his first published comic book work, where he penciled and inked the feature The Unconquered. Heck would also work on Horrific, Danger, Death Valley, and Weird Tales. For Weird Tales #1, Don Heck provided the cover along with a 6-page story, Hitler's Head. Unfortunately, the horror comics trend at the comics media and comics in general ended in 1954 due to the Knifer Committee, which saw the industry severely restrict comic book content for decades due to public backlash. Heck did remember meeting Ross Andru through there, where he was currently working with Mike Esposito under the Mike Ross publishing name. He also met fellow artist Peter Morrissey, who would later have a big impact on his future career. At Toby Press, Don Heck worked on Captain Galleon of the Foreign Legion, a one-shot meant to tie into the TV show of the same name. In addition, he did a couple of westerns which he enjoyed. Meanwhile, one of Heck's friends, Peter Morrissey, went to a comic book publisher for a job, but when he got there, the editor-in-chief showed him art samples of what he was looking for, many of which included Don Heck's work. Morrissey replied if he wanted Don Heck, he could arrange that, which the editor agreed to. His name was Stan Lee, and the studio was Magazine Management, aka Atlas Comics, formerly Timely Comics. Today, we know it as Marvel Comics. On September 1st of 1954, Don Heck went to work for Atlas Comics as a staff artist, doing features like Werewolf Beware and Mystery Tales #25 on January 1955, which was his first known work at the company, and The Red Pirate. In addition, he worked on the Navy Comics on the feature Torpedo to Taylor. Heck especially enjoyed working for Stan Lee, calling him a great writer and salesman, but he would admit to having never met Martin Goodman, the actual founder and owner of Marvel Comics. At Atlas, Don Heck was able to produce 2 pages a day when he worked exclusively for the company before being let go due to a lack of work in 1957. During this time, Heck worked providing plans for model airplanes and such before returning to Atlas in 1958 after Stan Lee called him back. Tragically, this was due to the accidental death of Joe Manlia, Atlas's best artist at the time, thus there was a need of artists to replace him. Back at Atlas, Don Heck worked on Tales to Astonish and Tales of Expense, for which he provided the cover of #1 on January of 1959. Even though the page rates had dropped, though they were eventually returned during the 1960s. Heck especially loved working with Jack Kirby, calling him a brilliant artist. Even though when he inked his pencils, he noticed their styles did contrast a bit, as Heck was more realistic and Kirby was more fantastic in designs. One of Don Heck's greatest accomplishments was the creation of Iron Man, my personal favorite superhero, who first appeared in Tales of Suspense number 39 on March 1963 with Stan Lee, though he would later state it would take some getting used to Stan Lee's Marvel method of writing, in which Lee would give the artist the basic outline for the story, let them draw, and then Lee came back and put in the word balloons. Hex would state that Lee would give details on the first and last pages while leaving the artist to fill in the middle. Stan Lee himself would later joke it was his lazy man's device so he could provide stories for up to 10 artists at a time, but eventually perfected to the ideal way to form a comic book. Eventually, Heck would soon start to enjoy the freedom of this method, providing him as an artist in 1962, and later stated he hated scripts with lots of talking. Don Heck would comment on his techniques, such as preferring scripts with more action over talking, and he says talking heads look good on TV, but not in comics. In designing Tony Stark, Don Heck based his look on the film star Errol Flynn, while Jack Kirby actually designed the original Iron Man gray armor, along with providing the cover, with Heck doing the exterior pages for his first appearance. Heck would later miss out on redesigning Iron Man's armor to the now standard red and gold look, which Steve Ditko did, due to living away from the city where Marvel offices were located. Heck would also help in crafting Tony Stark's supporting cast, specifically his bodyguard Happy Hogan and his secretary love interest Pepper Potts, both who first appeared in Tales of Suspense number 45 on September 1963. One design choice he hated doing was making Happy Hogan and Pepper Potts prettier, believing they work better when they're more down-to-earth styles. Heck would say that Happy should look like a pug, being a former boxer, while Pepper should be more homely. During his run on Iron Man, Heck would also help create many of his comic book villains, from the Mandarin, who first appeared in Tales of Suspense number 50, February 1964, to Hawkeye in issue number 57 on September 1964. Hawkeye, of course, later became a hero and Avenger, and like another of his co-creations, the Black Widow, who first appeared in Tales of Suspense number 52 in April of 1964. Heck's work on Hawkeye would be notable, with many still considering him the definitive Hawkeye artist, and the original look for him by Heck design hasn't changed much to this day. Don Heck would later take over Ant-Man from Jack Kirby, and especially enjoyed drawing the Wasp, as he got to ink her introduction in Tales to Astonish number 44 in June of 1963 over Jack Kirby's pencils. Hex also enjoyed the challenge of Ant-Man and later Giant Man, which he said the name change came about from Stan Lee to increase sales, as drawing everyday objects in different sizes was fun. However, one story Heck hated was Aragon from Outer Space. In addition, Heck was surprised at this as Spider-Man, believing he was a so-so character at first, despite becoming Marvel's flagship character. Heck would even joke later that you knew book sales were lagging at Marvel when Spider-Man made a guest appearance in order to boost them, noting his popularity. Don Heck's first Avengers story would be number 9 on August of 1965, with the introduction of the Wonder Man, whom he co-created with Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. However, this caused some controversy with DC, as they felt Marvel was plagiarizing Wonder Woman, which was not the intent. Stan Lee would even have Wonder Man killed off as a peace offering, but when DC created Power Girl years later after Marvel's own Power Man, Luke Cage, Lee brought Wonder Man back to life. He also ordered the creation of Spider-Woman to keep DC from trademarking that name as well. Back to Wonder Man, Heck designed his original costume, while further down his Avengers run, he would also introduce a new team of Captain America, Hawkeye, Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver, the Wasp, and Giant Man. This would also be around the time that Giant Man's name was also changed to Goliath. He had a lot of names over the years. Heck also co-created the villain Count Nefaria in issue number 13, February of 1965, the Swordsman in issue number 19 in August of 1965, Power Man, who later became the villain Atlas in number 21 on October of 1965, the Collector in number 28 of May of 1966, Bill Foster, the future Black Goliath in issue number 32 in September of 1966, and the Living Laser in number 34 on November of 1966. Heck would eventually be replaced by John Buscema, which occurred when he went on vacation and Buscema stepped in, astounding Stan Lee, Roy Thomas, and the readers with his art. As a result, Buscema took over the Avengers, while Heck was given something else. Don Heck would find work at Marvel outside of just comic books. In 1964, Don Heck worked with the Merry Marvel Marching Society, Marvel's fan club, and later in the Marvel Superhero Trading Cards in 1966. And with 11 of Iron Man's cards, 10 used Don Heck's art. That same year, the Marvel Superheroes cartoon premiered, where it was infamous for using original comic book art of animation, with human mouths replacing the faces for dialogue. 65 episodes were produced, each containing 3 7-minute segments, resulting in 195 segments covering the entirety of the Marvel Universe at the time from September 1st to December 1st of 1966. Of the 13 episodes of Iron Man produced, 6 used Don Heck's art from the comics. Don Heck would later work on the X-Men from issues number 38 to 42, November of 1967 to March of 1968, and would co-create Havoc during his run in issue number 54 on March of 1969 with writer Arnold Drake. However, like most artists, he found team books very difficult with their numerous characters. He did like drawing Thor, though. He would be turned down by writer Robert Kanier, which angered him, starting with the Wonder Man story, something that particularly galled him since he co-created the character. Eventually, Don Heck had to draw pretty girls better as they were becoming more common at Marvel. Thus, he studied the Dragon Lady from Milton Caniff's Terry and the Pirate strip, and soon, Heck would be known as drawing the prettiest girls in comic books. He would later work on Amazing Spider-Man Annual number 3, along with Daredevil. Working with John Romita Sr.'s layouts, Heck also penciled Amazing Spider-Man number 57 to 64 and 66, February and September, and in November of 1969, along with Captain Marvel, Iron Man, Captain Savage, Chamber of Darkness, and Tower of Shadows. He also worked on romance books Our Love Story and My Love. Like many artists, he personally liked the inker Vinnie Coletta, but hated the inks he provided for his pencils. Coletta was infamous for erasing details with his inks. Of the artists he did work with at Marvel, he admired Jack Kirby the most by also taking points for John Buscema. One trick Heck did learn was saving copies of his work before sending it to the publisher so he could prove what it originally looked like before the inkers got a hold of it. Outside of superhero work, Don Heck ghosted on The Phantom and the Terry and the Pirates newspaper strips. Heck would comment he wasn't as favored at Marvel as Jack Kirby at Steve Ditko, pointing to an incident where Stan Lee gave Steve Ditko his choice of assignments, but then told Heck he was working on the X-Men. However, Heck attributed this to them being creators on the level of Lee. He did get frustrated with Lee constantly asking him to be more like Kirby, Ditko, or Buscema, though John Romita Sr. would later explain that was Lee's way of saying he wanted to be more dramatic or dynamic, and he did that to all the artists. Barry Windsor Smith would even comment that the kind of dynamism that Kirby created wasn't in Heck's wheelhouse. Heck also received criticism for his inks, which he hated as he preferred penciling as that allowed him to be a storyteller, with Lee saying his inks were too fine, preferring Joe Sennett's gutsier inks. However, this eventually boiled over, leading to Heck's departure from Marvel. Don Heck would leave Marvel when Roy Thomas removed him from another book, leading him to go to DC, where he worked on the horror and romance books, his first being a short story in House of Secrets number 85, May of 1970. His first superhero story for DC was The Flash number 198, June of 1970, doing a backup story for the Scarlet Speedster. Later, Heck provided the pencils for the popular Batgirl and Jason Bard backup features in Detective Comics, along with Rose and Thorn and Superman's girlfriend, Lois Lane. He got his job from Jack Kirby, who was at DC at the time, and suggested Heck for the job to then DC editor Carmen Infantino. While working at DC, Don Heck still found some time for Marvel. In 1974, his art was used in the Marvel Values stamp. In 1975, his art appeared on the 7-Eleven Slurpee cups featuring various Marvel characters. During this time, Heck also worked for Skywald Comics, a short-lived publisher of black and white magazines such as Nightmare and Psycho. Don Heck would later return to Marvel in the 1970s, doing work on Daredevil, The Submariner, and The Flash. He also penciled giant-sized Avengers number 4, which featured the marriage of Vision and Scarlet Witch. Most significantly, he co-created Mantis with the writer Steve Eagleheart in Avengers number 112 on June of 1973, a character who has now had a significant place in the MCU. On October 1975, Heck and writer Tony Isabelle launched the book Champions at Marvel, a superhero team that consists of an eclectic group of heroes from Angel to Hercules. However, it only ran for 17 issues, being canceled in January of 1978 due to an erratic publishing schedule and poor sales. By this point, Don Heck was working exclusively for DC in 1977, where he would stay until 1988. There, Heck co-created The Steel, the Indestructible Man with writer Jerry Conway, first appearing in his titular comic on March of 1978. During this time, Don Heck became the regular penciler on The Flash, starting with issue number 280 on December of 1979, and would stay with the series until 295 in March of 1981. However, he wasn't a fan of the constraints put on him by the editors, saying he would show the Flash in multiple images to demonstrate his speed instead of being a blur. which is what Heck would said was more appropriate. Following The Flash, Heck started work as a regular penciler on Justice Society League of America, beginning with issue number 201 on April of 1982. At one point, it was rumored that Heck would become the penciler on the long-gestating JLA Avengers crossover, but nothing came of it. The series would eventually be published in 2003 to 2004, with George Perez providing the art. Heck later became the regular penciler on Wonder Woman, beginning with issue number 306 on August of 1983, having occasionally worked in the series since issue number 199. During his run, he did his own pencils and inks, doing so by not making his original pencils so tight so he could spend more time on the finishes. He would stay on the series for almost 30 issues in 2 years to its cancellation in 1986 due to low sales. Heck would later work on the DC Challenge series that same year. In his personal life, Don Heck was divorced twice, which sparked rumors of a personal tragedy that kept him from drawing for a period of time. In 1989, Don Heck returned to Marvel Comics, where he was tasked with redrawing Tales of to Suspense number 50 for Masterworks collection in 1992. He also made Hawkeye stories in Solo Avengers number 17 to 20 and Avengers number 21 to 22, April to September of 1989. Heck also did various work for companies like Topps Comics, Hero, Millennium Publications. In 1990, Heck worked on a prequel comic for the film The Adventures of Ford Fairlane with Gerald Jones and Carmen Infantino. Don Heck died on February 28, 1995 from cancer at the age of 66. At the time, he was living in Suffolk, Long Island, New York. Following his death, he was recognized in the pages of Iron Man number 318 on July of 1995, along with Comic Book Marketplace number 23 and Heroes Illustrated number 23. John Romita Sr. would praise him as a true professional. Comic Buyer's Guide number 114 on March 24th, 1995 honored him with a 2-page story by Mark Evanier. Roy Thomas, Marvel's one-time editor-in-chief, probably described Don Heck the best when pointing out that he was an artist whose style didn't necessarily fit superheroes, but rose to the occasion, especially when working on Iron Man and the Avengers. As a result, he carved out a place for himself in the history of comic books. I would like to thank the chief source for this episode, Don Heck, A Work of Art, by John Coates. A great full-color biography of the artist featuring not only a great interview by him, but numerous of his peers, along with great reproductions of his art. A must-read for any comic book fan. Now is February 13th, 2025, time for the favorite comic of the week. It's Jeff, the Jeff Verse by Kelly Thompson and Guri Hero, which is another great series of vignettes of Jeff, everyone's favorite puppy shark. Yes, it's a half dog, half puppy, and all adorable fun. As he bounces around the Marvel Universe doing all sorts of different things, or arguing with chores with Hawkeye, or hanging out with Gwenpool. It's just a fun little bit of cartoon fun. No dialogue. Thompson does a great job of integrating Jeff into the Marvel Universe in a very fun, cartoony way, and it's just a lot of fun in general. And Guri Hero's art is nicely cartoony, fun. Really does a great job showing Jeff how cute and adorable he is, but also has a lot of fun and dynamic as a character. And it's just a fun little read. It shows what comics can be. Just fun, quick reads, no dialogue, great art, a lot of fun, and highly recommended. If you have a young kid looking to get into comic books, this is a great starter right here. It's Jeff. He's one of the best new characters in Marvel comics and comic books in general. Just a fun character. I mean, come on. He's half puppy, half shark. What's not to love? And with that, we will conclude with this Life of the Great Don Heck. Join me again next week as we start another biographical series. And until then, go out and enjoy yourself a good comic book. And Jeff, if you see It's Jeff anywhere in the comic book stands, check it out, because it's just a fun read in general.